pioneering solutions, transformational technology, and inspirational leaders. I'm your host, Connor Sherman, and this is the Confident Defense Podcast. Welcome to the Confident Defense Podcast. I'm your host, Connor Sherman, and today we have an incredible guest for you, my dear listeners. We have Grant Wernick. Grant is the inventor and serial entrepreneur who has built 3 natural language processing companies. He was part of the team that built AngelList. He laid the foundation for Kauffman Labs at Kauffman Foundation and is the co-founder and CEO for Fletch.ai, a natural language processing powered platform that highlights both risks and insights into cloud and SaaS environments. Grant, welcome to the show.
Connor, thanks for having me, man. I'm really excited about your mission and everything you're working on. So this is exciting to be collaborating with you.
Thank you so much, man. I know we spent a couple of weeks trying to get us to where we are today so we can finally have this recorded conversation. We've had so many incredible conversations off camera. We're like, yes, now we're going to get one on camera. But as I was doing my research and I was diving deep, on the podcast, we've had incredible people from like security strategists to CISOs that are practitioners to someone who's in the FBI who helped take down the whole credit card ring. That'd be E.J. Hilbert. And we've had this whole experience so far with the podcast. But I have to say, you're the first one that has publicly disclosed that you got a D on a college report for being so futuristic and calling out cyber terrorism as a major issue that your professor was like, nah, that's not a real thing. So funny. Talk to me, like, what got you into the security space? What got you in a framework where you were able to see kind of around that corner, what was coming around the corner? What got you excited about that?
That's so funny because you just took me back 20 years. 20 years to when I thought I wanted a poli-sci degree when I was in college at George Washington University in DC, working on Capitol Hill at the same time. And I remember I was in the poli-sci class and they're like, okay, everybody has to write a paper on what the biggest threats are to this world. And most people wrote about like nuclear proliferation and bioterrorism and stuff like that. And here's me saying, I think cyber is a really big deal. Granted, I was the only one in that class basically that ever come from Silicon Valley. And I grew up in Silicon Valley. I grew up with a dad who's done startups his whole life. And he's an early HP engineer. And so like, I know how vulnerable these systems are and how fragile these systems are that make up this awesome internet that people live on these days. And so I write this paper and the professor's like, that's nice, Grant. That's not really a threat. And this guy's a very famous guy in political science. And I'm quoting guys like who are very famous now, like Schneier. Schneyer's still famous to this day. And I'm quoting these guys and I actually remember going in and arguing with the teacher afterwards going like, this is a real problem. I can't believe you don't think so. And over the next 20 years, you're going to see this become a huge deal. At that point, I still thought I wanted to be governor of California, believe it or not.
Okay. Well, we had the Terminator be the governor of California, so I don't know if that was better in your favor or not. So
yeah. So and then as college went on, being in DC, it's like I know I want to go back to Silicon Valley. That's where the most creative things are happening. I know I want to be an entrepreneur. As I was in college, I got a great perspective on Washington and what happened on that side of the world. And like I want to take this human perspective I've learned and take it back to this super technical perspective of Silicon Valley. Security was not my first interest at all when I came back to Silicon Valley. My story actually started in semiconductors here at a major old world company called Applied Materials Equipment Manufacturer Semiconductors, awesome company. And it quickly went into consumer web. And I always wanted to do stuff around natural language, stuff that took the intelligence of machines and the intelligence of humans, and instead of humans having to adapt to machines, machines adapting to humans. Yeah. And I took this notion that all the wisdom's out there. So how do we quantify that and do the not interesting work, the BS work, if you will, and let the humans do the more intelligent work? And that was over 12 years ago when I did my first startup, Wiata. I launched that at TechCrunch Disrupt 2011. That's pretty fun.
That's incredible. And I definitely want to come back to that because a lot happened in Wiata based on my research, and like a lot of cool stuff came out of that. I mean, you guys were better at local search than Google was, right? So we'll get there in a second. And just for the audience, just to make sure we're on the same page, we're going to talk through this episode. We're going to talk about NLP. we're talking about natural language processing, which if you trust the Wikipedia definition, and Greg, correct me if I'm wrong here, but natural language processing would be a branch of artificial intelligence, and as it studies how machines understand human language. So it goes back to what you're saying, where the human can be ourselves in our language, and we force the computers to get smarter to adapt to us versus us trying to learn them. Is that a fair breakdown?
That's fair. That's a fair assessment. And we're still in the early days of NLP. As much as people want to say we're really far along in this stuff, NLP is kind of, you could call it the bad brother to machine learning. It's still half magic, half dark art, and it cannot be done with 100% machine learning, no matter what people are saying these days. You need a ton of human training data. So it's one of those semi-supervised models that is necessary, and a lot of code. And definitely humans in the loop. And that's why you have folks like knowledge engineers. So NLP is still in its infancy, and it's really fun to be focusing on it. And it works really well for pointed use cases as opposed to trying to solve this super broad need, which a lot of folks you'll see in academia are trying to solve very broad kind of NLP things. And there's a lot of cool research going on there. What we're doing is actually taking practical applications of it to the real world.
And so what was the drive to bring you to the NLP? And what's that story? Because you spent 12 years in NLP, right? And it's as a discipline to be focused there. You know, I see a lot of people in Silicon Valley, and they kind of chase the next thing, right? They have something grabs their attention and they go deep into that. It's wonderful. I see it in the security space all the time, but, you know, chasing the next shiny thing with their career. You've been a subject matter expert in this particular area for a long time. You've gone very deep in this space. So what was the motivation to really unpack NLP and really spend time in that area?
Well, I've always thought, as I said a little second ago, like machines should adapt to us more. And there's a lot of information out there. And there's multiple sides of NLP. The side that's probably most used is the side of actually doing extractions of NLP to look at topics and that kind of stuff. So things like topic modeling are very common. And so it's the inverse of like what we do. What I really focused on is natural language search. And natural language search is trying to actually pull apart your phrases to understand what you mean, as opposed to doing keyword lookup. Very difficult when a human says things like, show me network traffic to China. You have to understand what network traffic is. You have to understand China's location. You have to understand to means going there. Natural language engines pull apart all this kind of stuff. And I think that they yield a very powerful interface to harness our intelligence. We have a lot of intelligence that a machine's not going to copy. And although people do think AI is taking over, this is the part that is really special that humans can do, that human creativity, and let the machines do the heavy lifting of pulling that stuff apart and figuring out where it should be in various databases and that kind of stuff. That's the really amazing thing about that NLP can help you with. But NLP is really a surface to, you have to build a lot of layers of understanding underneath it. And that's something else that I've specialized in over the last 12 years, is just really putting together very smart ways of collecting, organizing, and correlating data. It's almost more important than this NLP layer, because most people don't want to spend their time on this really not fun work. It's not interesting. Most data scientists don't want to spend their time on it, but it's 90% of the problem is just getting things organized, and letting machines help automate that organization. That is super key.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that, so while I was doing my research for this conversation, I came across an article you had written. This is 2019, making a 2020 prediction. And so I would just say it was just a general prediction. And correct me if you feel I'm misquoting this, but from what I have my notes here was that 2020 would be the year that people realize that more data is not necessarily a better thing. You go on to say, we spent the past few years gorging ourselves on an all-you-can-eat data buffet with greasy lips and distended bellies and shortness of breath. We have hit a tipping point. We can't carry on the way we have. This year is when we start to become purposeful about the data that we ingest.
Yeah, so
it was a great way of laying it out. I just what brought you to that? Why are we there? What brought us to this place where we're gorging ourselves? And what do you think's next with us?
So over the last 10 years, we've gone through this evolution, which is a really cool evolution, like the big data evolution, right? And you've seen a lot of investment in this world. Um, and I think it's really important that we've seen a lot of investment in this world. But what we've done is a lot of folks have said, okay, well, big data, we need to put it all in one place. And then, so the whole emergence of the data lake. And
Mhm.
then as you fast forwarded about 5 years ago, the cloud starts becoming a bigger deal. And today, the cloud's a huge deal. Everybody's moving there or is already there. Um, and as you combine these two things together, it becomes, well, the cloud makes it so I can have everything and I can just elastically expand this thing. And the data lake makes it, I can put it all in one place. And so people have spent a lot of time doing exactly this. Why? Because boards and the executive level say, well, if we want to do anything with data and make data part of the business, we got to get it together. We got to put it all in one place. And there's been a lot of mandate about going to the cloud and a lot of mandate about data lakes. The issue is that is hard engineering work, and it's actually fun engineering work for a lot of infrastructure engineers. They really get excited about AWS and GCP and Azure, and they want to move that stuff over. And it's exciting for those engineers to build out clouds. Things like Databricks are awesome data lakes and that kind of stuff. Or if you go back to the first generation, it was like Hadoop related things in Cloudera. And it's interesting to do this, but rarely is the technician who can bring this stuff into that world the domain expert that actually needs to do anything with the stuff in that world. So they'll put it all over, they'll get it all going, they'll scale it all out, and now you have, instead of a beautiful data lake, you have a data swamp. And it's funny you bring up this thing. I actually wrote an article at the Mary Kondo of data. It's like, let's get purposeful about what we're bringing over. Let's have the people that are actually the domain experts, the folks that really want to get value of this data, help dictate what should come over. Let's just not blindly move over to the cloud and then dump things. Like, we don't even need most of this stuff over here. And believe it or not, when you move from your on-prem world to your cloud world, if you take the same norms, you're going to end up paying a fortune, and you're not going to get the value you want out of it. So as you're moving to this new world, you got to really be purposeful, and you got to come at it from a place of the end customer. Like, we want to get insights about X. We want to understand Y. We want to dig into these kinds of things. And most people are not coming at this in a way of organizing it. So they're dumping it in there. Whether this is an amazing data lake, they're not getting nearly the value out of it. Or a log store like Splunk, you're not nearly getting the value out of it because you're constantly dumping these into what becomes a swamp.
Yeah,
And
you
then
spend so much time collecting it, not enough time getting anything out of it. Yeah.
exactly.
Cool. So I see this conversation go a few different ways, and we'll take it however it organically arises. But you've built three incredible companies, right? You've built three companies centered around this idea that we can use natural language processing and we can use the data beneath it to surface up really cool insights. You've then built this company, Fletch, which is all about that specifically in a security context, and just say you have this huge sprawl of SaaS and cloud and all of that, and you're bringing that up to practitioners. So I would like to make sure we touch on both those and unpack both your generic entrepreneurial spirit, and then specifically how it's manifested in the security space.
Okay.
So if I may, I want to just kind of go back to the first half of this, which is your story up to Fletch, right? You've built these three companies. What were some of the coolest things that you've built in those three companies? What are some things that you're most proud of in that? And then we'll get over to the security space, because I want to go really, really deep over there. So, but go back to me to Wiata and the other companies that you were working with.
So I was really fortunate. I love talking to people. I love learning from people. And I came into this world of web at a point when we were kind of, you could say it was the lull of the early 2000s, that the recessionary period there. And I'd come back from college, and I started getting to know a lot of very interesting people. And I was right in the heart of everything going on. And so I had some great mentorship, and entrepreneurship is a wonderful mentorship model. So you mentioned earlier on, I was fortunate enough to help create AngelList. That's because the people around me, like Nivi and Naval, were some of the people who taught me so much. And actually at one point I was even like roommates with Nivi. And as we were building this thing, it was very clear this was their company. They taught me so much. Or being around people that were serial entrepreneurs. There's this fellow I really like. His name's Jim Pitcow, and a lot of people in Silicon Valley know who this fellow is. I was able to be exposed to Jim, and he helped me a lot. Or this fellow, Chet Kapoor, he runs data stacks now, and Chet ran Apogee, an amazing leader. And these people are people I got to be around over the years and learn from. So if you go back to my early career, I thought I was, when I came back to Silicon Valley, it was a big company, and then I thought I was going to go to B school, and then I decided not to because I was in the middle of this world, and I started helping develop the foundation of this world that we have today with the consulting business I created, with the notion that I was going to start creating my own companies. An area that always interested me a lot was natural language, machine learning, natural language search, and I was always this go-to person people came to for what to do. I was very much a center, a hub where people would love to have parties and events with me. It was always really fun. And I realized that there's a lot of data out there in the real world around what to do in the time of, like, in our leisure time with the people we want to spend our time with. And so what if you could create a product that could help you figure out what to do? And all you could say is like, hey, show me a place in downtown San Francisco that has great sushi, steak tartare, and have reservation available for 4 at 7 p.m. on Friday night. It's a little romantic. That's what WeOutta was. That was my first company. And we launched at TechCrunch Disrupt 2011 with the same co-founder I have now, Jacob Perkins. Jake actually has a master's in natural language processing and wrote one of the de facto books on it, natural language processing with Python. A really good book. And so Jake and I wanted to build something together. Like, Jake, with all the information's out there, what if we're the first company that brings together the Facebook graph, brings together Yelp and Ticketmaster and StubHub and Fandango and all this stuff, and we create this amazingly powerful correlation engine that you can now ask questions about the real world in natural language and browse through it very easily. Well, this is actually when we invented something called Swipe. A lot of people use that today with their dating applications. And
so you were the swipe right, you were swipe left.
We were the original Swipe, and I'm really thankful for how exciting that's been for the whole world. Yeah, it's been quite an awesome contribution to help in that sense and what it's done for the world. It's fun to see. It's fun to see.
There are many happy couples out there who could thank you for the swiping.
Yes, there are. It's actually really cool that was the ultimate use of it. But we used it at WeOutta, which was way back in 2011, 2012 timeframe, to like, hey, we want to get machine learning and understand what your personal likes are. So you do like a search, like I just mentioned a second ago, and we bring up all the restaurants in downtown San Francisco good for what you wanted, and you're like, no, yep, and you would tell us, and you would teach us, and you would teach the machine learning engine instantly about your tastes and needs. And combine that with a Facebook graph. Let's say you flew to Denver. As you're landing in Denver, you'd start using your personalization of what you liked and your friends. You would land in Denver and say, like, these are places Grant's been to, Connor. What do you think? And based on your taste and what Grant's been to, here's a bunch of cool Japanese restaurants. Like, we could get that smart.
Wow.
That was the first company, and it was a lot of fun. Second company, yes, it was very much smarter than the local search that you still have today, and eventually WeOutta may resurface. The next company was Insight Engines. In 2015, I realized with the WeOutta team, it's like, hey, we learned how to talk to data. Let's start a new company together, guys. Let's not sell this thing. Let's keep some of that awesome IP and work together more. And so that's what we did, which is unheard of, by the way, especially when you have folks wanting to buy the thing. It's like, that's most of the time you just sell it. And we said, no, we want to keep working together. We have a bigger vision. What we learned during our WeOutta years is how to talk to data. And it was a consumer company, don't forget.
Right.
But we're very hardcore technologists, born and bred in Silicon Valley here. And like, no, we actually know how to talk to data. Let's take this to the enterprise. And I started doing a lot of research around that. And I started realizing one of the biggest places around the enterprise when machine data is going up at a rate like this, and that data lake issue I just talked about, and the cloud issue I just talked about, you start ending up in a world where people really need help. And as we dug deeper into that world, we started realizing the biggest place people needed help was around security and investigating and finding bad guys. So we built this company, Insight Engines, all around digging into your machine data in partnership with folks like Splunk. It's actually built on top of Splunk. And as we dug in deeper, it was a very cool product. You could ask about network traffic, going to
See,
China.
this is what kills me. It's like when I was doing the research for this, I'm like, and I understood what Insight Engine was. I'm like, where were you when I was running all of my security operations centers on Splunk? And I was just like, had only I known that this existed, because the amount of energy and life force that we put into correlation searches and dashboards with drill downs through, and like all trying to do this, but like from the wrong angle, right? It's kind of like you're I don't know. I can't find a proper analogy, but you're kind of starting here at the very light level. You've got like, oh, a dashboard and a widget, maybe this will help be a good signal. And it's just almost impossible when you've got terabytes of data a day and you're trying to surface something like, not just it was deviation from baseline, but like there's a narrative here within the data and figuring that out like you guys were doing with Insights Engine. So yeah, keep telling me more about like, because I think this was such a, the way you tackled it, obviously I'm like, I really wish I knew you existed a few years ago. And now I'm looking at this and now I see where you're going with Fletch.ai. And now I'm like, okay, it's starting to make sense to me. So I don't want to jump the gun, but like,
Please.
So walk us through with Insights Engine. Like what you mentioned, like Riata was you learned to talk to data. What happened with Insight Engine?
So Insight Engines, well, rewind to 2015. We had this notion about talking to data, and we started digging into it, and we started looking at all the issues like people like you had, and we're like, yeah, wait, we can help people like this. We can help them know where network, ask those questions and do those correlations. And what if instead of doing a massive correlation for show me network traffic to China today versus the last 30 days and create the standard deviations and moving averages and writing a ton of very complex stuff for 2 weeks straight, like you just mentioned, having to bring in all the sources and normalize it. What if we could do that for you on your Splunk? That was the impetus around the Insight Engines. And we started getting really smart and helping a lot of very awesome teams in healthcare, in defense, in finance, tech, across the gamut of a lot of the Fortune 500. And we were seeing some really good success because people could do hunting and forensics investigations in a fraction of the time and do these super complex searches of their Splunk environment very quickly. Then in 2016, we actually launched on Splunk's Splunk Conf, Splunk Conf 2016. And so in 2016, we launched at Splunk Conf. And then actually, as part of the keynote, and Splunk is an investor in Insight Engines, and it was just awesome. I was up there on stage, like 10,000 people or something tuned in across the world on webcasts, and like a couple thousand people in the audience, maybe like 4,000 or so. And the CEO of Splunk, Doug Merritt, very cool guy. I got to come up on stage and I got to show this off to like this huge fan base of folks in the Splunk world, and you know how much of a cult following Splunk has.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Like, people got super excited, like, wait, you can actually ask questions of this, and I don't need to have tons of tribal knowledge. And it was just really an exciting moment. And from there, we started really expanding to that group I just talked about, financial institutions, government organizations, et cetera. And we started solving this problem that the analyst had about digging deep. This was an interesting problem to solve. But as we dug deeper into it, we got into the fact of most people weren't setting up their world very well. And so most people's Splunks were not set up very well. So we ended up having to set up the whole thing for them.
Yeah, it's hard.
It wasn't
Splunk's hard. It's not easy.
It's not, and it's a beautiful product if you set it up super well, but most people were not setting it up that well. And we dug in farther and we're like, and most people don't know the smart natural language questions to ask. Even once it is set up really well, having our product ask the smart natural language questions with them, there's only one person usually in the team who is going to think about things in terms of questions. A lot of that team has been fed an alert and they're clicking on alerts and then they're triaging things. So the way the system was built wasn't necessarily the perfect storm, if you will, because it was set on a very old model of the way the SOC functions.
Yeah.
And if I looked at it, it's like, okay, there's more fundamental problems we have to solve for people. And this is the impetus for Fletch. And it was a hard impetus to do because like Insight Engines is a very cool product, and Insight Engines still exists and people still use it. It's pretty cool, but it's very narrow when it's inside that world. And so like we went at this and we raised our round of capital back in 2017 to build something that was bigger than just one data lake. It could cross many platforms. It could organize data automatically for you. It could give you executive answers. It could do things for you. This is the impetus for Fletch. And this is what I'm so excited about.
I mean, this is what you started walking me through what the platform looks like, the product looks like. And I'm just like, everybody needs to know this. Like everybody should be informed of what Fletch can do, and then they can make a decision if they're going to get it or not. But I'm like, this changes everything. The ability for an analyst to be at 2 o'clock in the morning. Hey, I was just thinking through something. I woke up, I asked a question. Okay. In natural language, no tribal knowledge, get it. It comes back, and I've queried not just what's in one place, but I'm doing the sales pitch for you, but I'm like, oh my God, this thing is so cool. And I got really excited about it. So hence the podcast, because I saw what I think you're seeing here, which is really the opportunity to change how security practitioners interact with their data sets. Like it's just a change of relationship, a change of the contract between the data and the analyst who wants the insight is changing, and Fletch is that in the middle there. So tell us more about Fletch. Like so we kind of brought you up to Fletch, but like, what's your vision for Fletch? And I think it'd be fair to give the audience a walkthrough of like why this is so different than just your next analytics engine. Why is it different than something static like a Tableau or something like that?
Yeah. So we learned a lot with insight engines over the last 5 years, and the team's actually expanded a lot. And as I look to bring on this new product, this new company, Fletch, I realized that the opportunity goes really deep. You have awesome products like Tableau, but Tableau still relies on very technical people doing all the data extractions and putting together static dashboards to have something gorgeous that an executive and others can look at. And our biggest learnings over the last few years have been, you need to automate all that machine like collection of data. You need to automate all that organization of data. You need to automate all that correlation of data and not just get it in one place, but make it usable. And you need to take 6 months to a year of work of putting these things into a system and make that be something that can just happen in 24 hours or less, and let that all automate so you can ask those natural language questions that come to mind late at night for you. Well, that's a really hard problem, and nobody solved it. And you also need to be able to go farther than log data. Log data is really interesting, but it's only one piece of the problem. You have metric data, and you also have catalog data, all that stuff about like how many S3 buckets I have and that kind of stuff. Or how is this thing configured, or who are my user groups? That's all usually stored in Excel spreadsheets, even to today, or lookup tables. And it's like you have these 3 very disparate sets of data that you need to solve IT and security problems. And so as we move to the cloud, I saw a really interesting opportunity, and this is the impetus for Fletch, is everybody moves to SaaS and everybody moves to cloud products. Well, we can get very smart, and we can create a lot of automation to bring in all the platforms people use every single day. And we can make this so easy that your executives can look at it, your analysts that are really smart can move really fast, and the people new can come up to speed very quickly. And then you can take this across the organization.
Yeah.
And so Fletch solves some really fundamental problems for people. One, it solves that really, really heavy lifting problem of just organizing my data, get it in one place, keep it up to date. And that is 90% of what I observed over the last 4 years of what people are doing with their data lakes. The smartest people are spending all their time just keeping the thing afloat. Or you're hiring these super expensive, super smart, wonderful, like professional services people who can probably be better served at using their intelligence to help you create really good content to actually find bad guys or find problems in your infrastructure. That's problem 1.
Yeah. No, I was just going to ask about, it's like, keep going, but please. That's problem 1. What's problem 2 here? Because I completely couldn't agree with you more.
Problem 2 is the search language, and that's why Fletch is the sequel to SQL. You can't have tons of people because there's very few that exist that know these esoteric search languages, or MySQL looks totally different than your SQL. It's really difficult to move very quickly and investigate things if it's proprietary languages that have to constantly go back and forth to blogs to look up the next command. For most people, that is their existence. Most people are not a wizard at any of these languages, especially when you're starting to go to a world where you have lots of integrations and the world's moving very fast. It's moving at the rate of code because an engineer can spin up in a new instance like that and the whole world's changed. And so now you deal with a world where it's moving so quickly and everything becomes special snowflake. You have to become an expert at so many different interfaces and so many different integrations and so many different things. It's just not sustainable. And so you end up in a situation that's way too hard. So that's problem 2, is make that really easy. Make it so you can use natural language. This goes back to the next 12 years, instead of having to use esoteric search languages. So the sequel to SQL is a phrase that we've coined here at Fletch. Problem 3.
So I want to unpack the right question problem.
Sure.
I mean, I got asked this very early on in my career, and it's like haunted me since. And it said, Connor, we're detecting stuff. Are we detecting the right stuff? And I wanted to know, and that was a question I got from a CISO early on. We're detecting, alerts are firing, we're detecting stuff. Are we detecting the right stuff?
Yeah.
And that is such a haunting question when you think about it,
Yeah.
because like, where are the boundaries of as a defender, you have to win every day. As an adversary, you have to win once. And so you're constantly trying to push that out.
Well
what is
said.
the next, what is the next permutation of this attack? How is this adversary that slightly have different motivations can bring in different tool sets to do something different? So can you walk us through, like, what does Fletch surface for folks? Like, why are you so passionate about this? And also we can touch on that community aspect of it. Like,
Sure.
There seems to be a human relationship where we can all kind of upskill each other with something like this.
So that's problem 3 that Fletch tackles. And this is a huge problem and another one nobody's been able to tackle. It really goes into what should I be asking? What should I know? And so this is something we learned over the last 4 years too. Well, let's ask things for people. And since it's all in natural language, anybody can understand this stuff. And let's have a team of really smart people that's constantly asking questions you never dream of. Let's have a community around you that is, and I'll get to that in a second, that you can pull from, that if you're like, it's highly unlikely you're the specialist at X thing or Y thing, let's say SOC 2 compliance, but in the community there probably is, that you can start pulling from to help you with these needs, these burning questions. And so with this, I think the biggest thing that we're tackling is helping you discover what you should be asking, helping push the envelope. And I like to describe this as a great security team of like 10 people or 20 people. They have some perspectives and they have some knowledge and they can dig into a few things, but what if you could amplify that to a community of hundreds and some of the smartest people in the industry? So this is the coolest thing I think Fletch tackles, is that every day it's asking questions for you, bringing them to you in like an Instagram-like feed. And at the same time, you have a team of experts that's constantly putting together, picture reading like dark reading, but when you're reading dark reading, it's coming to life with your data. That's the kind of stuff Fletch is doing for you. They're actually telling you a story and you're seeing that story unravel with your data in real time. But we took this a step further and we said, okay, great. Our team of experts can curate some degree of content and some degree of good ideas. But because we're a natural language engine and because we've done all this heavy lifting with problem 1 we solved, we've normalized the universe and we've done something nobody else has ever done. And so now, instead of me writing a search one way and you writing a search another way, I can just share it with you and I can say, show me every system that people in my X user group, my HIPAA compliance user group, we could say, have access to. And I could just text you that and you'd open it up and it would repopulate your data instantly. That's huge because now we're 2 friends working at different companies. Yeah. And instead of like sending over text messages of like, I think I see this IOC, or I think this is a good thing to ask for this compliance framework. And then you having to retool it and write out your own searches for it, or figure out what integrations you're going to need for it. You literally can copy, paste, or even click and go right into your Fletch, we call them data spaces. And you can immediately go into yours and see it repopulate with your data instantly. So now you got my great question, my great idea, and repopulate your data instantly. That's the stuff we're going to enable. And we already are seeing that. We've actually been in beta now for a bit, and people are like, they're not only blown away by problem 1 we solved, getting everything in one place. Problem 2, like the smart people are going to ask questions. but they're probably most interested in this piece of helping them discover and be on top of things they never thought they even could get to. It's like when a 0-day attack happens, it's like, oh my gosh, I know right away if I have this problem or not, instead of spending the next week trying to figure things out and look up those IPs and figure things out and dig through it all.
Yeah, it's a whole, I think it's fair to compare it to this wonderful project, open source called Sigma. And what Sigma tried to do is to try to say, let's take all the proprietary, like the Splunk, the Sumo Logic, all these query language and make like a universal language. But it was like a kind of a universal query language. And the community got behind that because it kind of had this idea like, oh, maybe we can have one library of detections that works across. But you don't get to talk about it in this context that you are, which is you get to say, show me my data my way that works for me. And it's just so that idea that we can have this safe share where you can have two parties and one can be like, here is what worked for me. I found really good stuff. See if it's over in your environment, Grant, and you run it too. I know I'm just parroting what you said, but I'm just like, It's such, what I find interesting about this, and this is what I want to get your next thought on is, what are the impacts do you think this will have on the security community at large, right? This is a community that self-selects to be isolating, to work in secrecy. Like that's kind of this culture that we've built. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if you feel that this opportunity where we can be more transparent, where we can safely share intelligence freely and insights and human capital freely, do you think that'll have a positive impact on security community?
Yeah, I do. It's funny how many people get their knowledge from Twitter in the security community these days. I'm sure you do too. And so you look at all those tweets from smart people and like, if every one of those tweets are basically a question asked in my world instantly, that changes the whole game. And so this knowledge sharing does exist and is a secretive community, and they do like to share with each other. Mostly it's like, are you in my little network of folks? And so the way we're already seeing it used is, I'm not going to, some people are sharing more publicly, but those are more industry luminaries and people that are well known, or maybe they're vendors who are doing integrations with us. That makes a lot of sense because they want people to use their products better, or they're trying to spread their wisdom. But the way you're seeing more of these individuals, and I think this will mature over time because it's a very new concept, the fact I can share ideas without sharing any data. Before I had to be really clandestine because my data was coupled with everything. Yeah. And so we're seeing them kind of share it in a closed way with their friends. There are the people they already trust. One CSO trusts another CSO, they're sharing it. That's phase one. Like let's let people get comfortable sharing it that way. And then once they've done that a bit, we're starting to see them share it with strangers, but they're not really that strange because the way we're building community around our product, it's like people they may not know in the real world, but they're also people using the Fletch platform. Yeah. And this is not like a proprietary question. It's maybe a question of an IOC they discovered or something like that. That's easily shareable to the rest of the community. And so we are seeing people getting more comfortable with that already, and we're only a couple months in. So I think this changes the way information is shared. You have the ISACs, which have been very much subscribe, pay, being in that world. That I think that actually this evolves that model significantly and almost creates a community and open source sharing, if you will. We're going to do this two ways. We're going to do one way where it's very vetted through our product marketplace. And the other way to do this is more in the shadows, which is like you can safe share, as you just coined there. You can safe share anything you want with your community. You do a search, you create one of these things we call boards. That's that article, like a dark reading like article. You could create one right now, Connor, and you could put it together. Like these are the 5 questions I ask in my AWS to make sure that nobody's exfiltrating data. And then you can share that with your friends, and then your friends can share that with their friends. And you're like creating a pseudo celebrity in the Fletch world. Yeah. Which is very different to take data and social together. This goes back to our consumer roots. We're taking consumer roots and combining that with data and giving people a fresh perspective. Like these products that we look at shouldn't feel like an IBM mainframe. They should feel as easy and fun and simple to use as Instagram, because that's the new generation of folks that's us that's coming into this world. And we're finding that really resonates with people to make things really easy to use and fun to use.
Goes back to your core ethos. Like the technology should be helping humans. We shouldn't have to change ourselves to the technology. Like it should adapt to us to help us solve our problems. We shouldn't have to go reschool and retool for 3 years to understand how to use the technology that has since changed and now is relevant. So
Yeah, that's exactly right.
you've talked about this idea of like building out a movement with Fletch. And I imagine part of that's what you're talking about, where like the sharing and the culture of that comes with a culture of transparency, because you're decoupling ideas from data. Is there more behind that movement that you want to create? What are some of the things that you would like to see Fletch have as positive impact on the security community?
Yeah, so far our relationship with data goes back to like people don't really have the promise of data hasn't been there, I guess is the best way to put it. It's like the idea has been there, all these cool use cases are there, but the promise really hasn't delivered. And if you look at what I want to create around Fletch, it's changing our relationship with data, and it's a 7-year journey. It's not going to happen right away. And if data becomes the background and our natural language engine becomes the enabler, and now you have a layer of expert community sharing, collaboration in and outside your own organization. And you start having something that an executive can look at, because that's how easy Fletch makes it, and something that a super technical person can look at, and they can both actually dig into. You start breaking down silos in the organization, and you start breaking down silos in the community. And so you start leveling out a world that finally brings the promise of data to the organization. And this is not overnight, but security and IT at the beginning, but we'll be taking Fletch to the marketing, the sales organization, and the finance organization. And this thing will grow very quickly, because now when I can ask smart questions and share questions and get the wisdom of the crowds going, it really changes the world of data. When I say a movement, and I know it's like this, there's a better way. There has to be a better way, and that's what technology is all about. And you see all of these amazing companies that emerge that change our relationship with something. Like whoever knew that the iPhone, if you ask the famous quote of like asking people if they wanted a better phone, they would just tell you, yeah, this flip phone, da da da. You never.
What, the Razor? Remember that? The Razor with the black flip phone? I was all the rage when that came out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes. I was very happy with my Razor when I got that.
So was I. Who would have thought we live and breathe on this thing, and we play with it all the time, and when we get all our information there and we deal with family there, it's like, that's the kind of thing that Fletch is going to be. Like Fletch will be the center of our data universe. And whether it's connecting to our individual services or connecting to these awesome data lakes that we've spent years tooling out, that's where Fletch will be. And Fletch will start in the security and IT world, because what better place to start it? It's the bread and butter of the middle of our new world. If we start in the middle of it and we really get success around this part, gaining trust and gaining knowledge, and it spirals out from there. But these are the people that are the stewards of this new world. That's us, the security and IT people. We're the stewards of this new cloud world that we all live in.
Yeah, because everyone's extracting value from something that we're protecting, and we're enabling, and we're orchestrating.
Everybody's a tech company these days, and that's something that's hard for people to grok. Everybody's a tech company, a beverage company, a bank. Everybody's a tech company these days, and it all comes back to this core, the IT and security core.
This is incredible. So you've obviously got a hell of a team behind you. They've got it. I know at the beginning of the podcast, you talked about the book that Jake had written on data analytics. I'm going to go find that, and it'll be linked in the show notes for the audience who wants to go dive deep and really geek out on this. But where can people learn a little bit more?
Anybody interested in NLTK? It's the book. It's the de facto book on using NLTK, which is one of the primary toolkits around natural language.
There you go. So I'm sure someone listening to this conversation is going to go deep, and they'll change their career because they recognize that this is the ability to unlock human creativity on a data set, a disparate data set. I mean, that's powerful. So for the rest of the audience who's listening here, where can they find out more? Where can they connect with you? Is it their socials, or is it an email? Like if they want to learn about Fletch, if they want to hear about your thoughts on this platform, or connect to that community that you were just sharing about, that are sharing those safe share boards?
So we're in the early phases. We're being very, you could say, highly selective about folks we want in this world. Why? Because these really have to be very creative people that want to move the world forward when you're trying to get something as big as what we're doing started. And so go to Fletch.ai. We have a simple sign up link there. You can sign up for it, and my team will be in contact with you. I have an awesome team, as Connor just mentioned. I mean, my head of security, Darian, like, he's my VP of technology. Darian comes from MITRE and FireEye and AWS. And Guru, my head of engineering, he's just an amazing human being. That's Zscaler, Shape Security. Like, we have hard roots in this world. So when I look at what we're trying to build, if you just want insights and ideas, those will come to you. But if you want to really change the way that security and IT functions, and you're somebody that really views yourself as the future of this world, join us. And at Fletch.ai is where you can start. We have a lot of interesting stuff on our Twitter. You can follow us on Twitter. We're constantly putting out new blog posts, so it gives you a taste of the kind of stuff we care about. And yes, we have a private group that is sharing those things. That if you're a good fit for this, and you're going to put some effort into changing the future, we'll let you in the door.
Well, fantastic, man. There's no greater call to action than that. I also noted on the website you are hiring as well. So
we are hiring. And what's interesting, if you're like somebody that really wants to change the world of security, like, if I go into NLP, a big part of NLP is having really smart domain experts. So that's one thing that you could definitely join us for. We're also hiring on the NLP, on the natural language side, as well as the go-to-market side. So feel free to shoot us a link.
Fantastic. Well, Grant, thank you so much for your time. It's been an incredible conversation. I'm excited for the movement that you're creating. I'm excited for the change that's coming because of Fletch to the security and technology community. So thank you for the 12 years of work that you're bringing now to shape the industry that we love so much.
Oh, my pleasure. The next 8 years is going to be even more interesting.
Oh, yes, it will. Okay. Until next time.
Till next time. Thank you so much, Connor. Thanks for having me.